This is Nicker coming with a topic on it, and this one's going to be on cloud gaming. And is it ready or not yet? Um, Everybody's been streaming things for years as far as like videos and movies and things like that, and rarely do we ever have anything on our devices as far as that goes anymore. But for the most part, we've all pretty much leaned towards downloading games and then playing them and only transmitting the data that we need. So what got me thinking about this is Stadia coming out and so many other cloud services coming out. And Stadia, with it having so many failed promises and such an issue with like stuttering and being able to make good on reliably hitting 4K and and just people having all sorts of issues with it. And with xCloud from Microsoft just around the corner, I thought now would be a good time to kind of stop and take a look at it and see what it's like, see what the kind of go into what my experience is having worked in the cable industry as far as what I've seen from behind the scenes as far as bandwidth utilization, contention, and things of that nature, right? So, not only to do 4K gaming with Stadia do you need a good speedy connection of at least 35 megabits a second, you also need to have the Chromecast and you need to pay $10 a month to be able to hit those speeds. Otherwise, they won't allow you to hit those speeds. They throttle you at a certain point. Well, not so much throttle you as far as speed goes, but throttle your resolution. They'll only let you do 1080p. Now, the recommended for 4K is 35 megabits a second. The recommendation for 1080p is 20 megabytes a second. To give you a comparison on that versus what an average stream would be as far as HD, a 1080p stream can be anywhere between 9 megabits a second and 15 megabytes a second. That's pretty average for that. Now, 4K goes up from that. That can be somewhere around like 20, 25 if it's really, really high quality. All this stuff will eat your bandwidth very, very fast. Normal HD streaming, usually most people don't come to their cap too bad. But you're also streaming like one thing for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then you're kind of done, and then you'll watch something else, or you'll watch a 6 minute video here and there. You're not usually streaming something constantly for hours and hours like you would if you were playing a game. So that's one thing to take into consideration when these mediums as a whole is your total bandwidth, because you stand a much, much higher chance in this kind of environment of hitting your bandwidth cap. One of the things that I found last night when I was kind of looking all this up is not only would your speed be a factor, like we were talking about just a second ago, your total data is going to be possibly a hidden cost. Most ISPs have a 1 terabyte data cap or an unlimited. So if you don't have the unlimited and you hit your 1 terabyte, which takes 65 hours of Stadia play, which sounds like a lot, but you're probably going to cut that in about half because you're going to be downloading things to your computers, downloading updates for your iPad or your phone. You're going to be streaming video. You're going to be playing other games, and that's going to eat up bandwidth. You're going to be browsing the web, things of that nature, and all those eat up your data rate. Most people on average don't hit their terabyte download. Now with Stadia, that's a different thing. That's going to be much, much more intensive because that turns out to where it's somewhere between, what did I find? 15 and 17 gigabyte an hour. Now, if you just dedicated it all to Stadia, it would be 65 hours. It's more like 73 or 74 if you just do 1080p. But it's still eating a ton of data. So one of the things that you guys need to do if you want to jump into this realm is you need to check with your ISP and you need to basically have them tell you or you know what your data cap is to see if you need to up to an unlimited plan. Now Comcast, what they will do is they will charge you $10, I want to say a gig, all the way up to $200, and then it doesn't go any higher than $200. However, you can opt to go to their unlimited plan, and that's an extra $50. So if you're intending on getting something like Stadia, I highly recommend that you go ahead and get an unlimited plan if you don't have one already. If you have any kind of data cap. Not every ISP has a data cap. I know Comcast in particular does because I did my homework on it last night. So in addition to the $10 to be able to stream the 4K, you would also need to pay $50 extra a month for the unlimited plan if you don't already have it. So that would make Stadia roughly $60 a month for you to do 4K if you wanted to do it. Even if you did 1080p, I would almost recommend that you go ahead and spend the $50 to get the unlimited data cap, because it starts to get expensive very, very fast if you go over your data cap. So it's something you don't want to do. It's just cheaper to go ahead and have the unlimited plan. So a bare minimum, I'd say $50 a month to be able to play on Stadia, $60 if you want to do 4K. So that's one thing, right? So going back to your actual bandwidth speed, most people, the average person, only gets about 65 megabits a second down on average, with Comcast leading the pack in that. They're generally the fastest. Now, in my area, I can go up to a gig, which I'm probably going to do soon because I just did my homework on it last night. They didn't really advertise it very well when they started offering a gig. So you should check with your ISP to see if you can get faster data rates and how much more it costs you, because it might be worth just spending a few extra bucks just to get a little bit extra speed, particularly if you want to get into something like this. Now, in order to stream in 4K, you need to have 35 megabits a second minimum. You need to have 20 megabits recommended for 1080p. So, you're going to eat up your bandwidth very, very fast with this, just by the amount of data that it wants to pump down. And we're not even close to like the top speeds. So there's other countries that are probably having fewer problems with this than us because they have better infrastructure. One of the things that's a problem is most ISPs are using cable lines in order to get you data. Now, that's a shared pipeline between you and the other users. So the chances of you hitting your optimal speeds of even the 65 megabits is going to fluctuate quite a bit depending on how many people are using the network. During the holidays, you're going to get lower top speeds. During weekends, you're going to get lower top speeds. During peak hours, you're going to get lower top speeds. Primarily the time that you're going to have the time to sit down and play these things. So you're going to have to keep a very, very close eye on what your average speed is in any given time to try and find the optimal time to be able to play this thing. Otherwise, you're probably going to have a poor experience. You also probably want to take a look and see who else is utilizing your network, because if you've got a bunch of people on using your network at any given time, it could cause you to basically have a little bit of slowdown. I know if I'm trying to like download a game and then I'm trying to sit there and play an MMO, not only is it grinding away on my hard drive trying to install this thing, but it's also using a lot of bandwidth. So my normal speeds are a lot slower when I do that. It just seems to eat the bandwidth for whatever reason on it. I can only pull so much through my modem. Now, another thing that could be a factor could be, since xCloud is doing this significantly better on the same networks that everybody's experiencing. I know Picky Old Gamer, another channel that I watch, and a real life friend of mine, had gone through and done a test between xCloud and he had done a test with Stadia. And he found Stadia ran exceedingly poor, but xCloud, even playing it just through an Android phone, not having a Chromecast or anything like that, it ran significantly cleaner. And that got me thinking about another thing that struck me as kind of odd between the two is Google has all this money and all this infrastructure. Why is it running bad? And then I got to thinking about it. Well, realistically, have they invested this architecture in Stadia itself? Or did they just set up a small bank in like maybe one data center, maybe two, and just decide that that was going to be enough? Whereas Microsoft has Xbox Live, and they've been basically putting stripped down like Xbox One S's in racks to run xCloud. So since they have more data centers, since they've been running Xbox Live longer, they have more hardware out there. And by that, I mean you stand a better chance of finding a data center that's closer to you and connecting to it. And one of the things in cable is you always want your endpoint that's front-facing the customer to be close to the customer as you can get it. That's financially fiscal to get to the customer. So, with that being said, with Xbox Live having more data centers, you're more likely to hit one that's fewer hops away from your house. That means you're probably going to get better uptimes and better downtimes on it, which means it's going to stream better, which means it's going to play better. So that's another thing that I don't know that Google has really spent any real time on. I think they were eager to get out the door, and I think they kind of threw this out in a hurry, and I think that's part of what's biting them right now. Now, another thing that could be causing the problem is people not really optimizing their old games that they loaded up on Stadia for that kind of technology. if the game isn't optimized for streaming, it's not really going to stream as well as one that was optimized for a streaming environment on it. So just because you can convert it and get it up there doesn't mean that you took into account the extra delay that you're going to have on the controller when you hit a button or when you try to move the analog stick to what shows up on the screen. Because most of these games that they have up there are older games that were really designed to be loaded up on a console or loaded up on a PC, where you don't have to really worry about input lag and such things like single player content. Now, multiplayer content, you may have that problem, but you're not going to have that problem necessarily on the solo content as far as the developer is concerned with the original intent on the game. Sorry guys, that's my cat. He's kind of getting in the way. Sniggums, go. So that's another thing to consider, is whether or not the games have been optimized or not for that platform. Now, they should have had something in their SDK that basically helped them be able to optimize it so that you wouldn't have that problem on there. But it doesn't mean that they kind of went through and rebuilt the whole game. They may have just converted it just enough so it loads up and runs on the platform. Now, with gaming as a service or as a streaming service, you're going to have to start design games differently as well, which is kind of where this is all going, right? Because most online games use stuff like either input delay or they use rollback, netcode. These are both netcodes, right? Input delay waits on one player to do an input and another player to do an input, and then it moves the state forward in the game. So the game moves forward at that point, once both players have input their choices at any given moment, right? Now, that's slower and laggier and causes more problems. So a lot of the better developers and most of the first-person shooter developers use what's called rollback. In that case, what happens is player A runs a simulation of what's happening at any given point. Player B runs a simulation of what's happening at any given point. Those two are compared, and then they can kind of even be rolled back and adjusted within a few seconds to basically determine any new inputs that were done by the player on it to determine who wins in any given encounter. Now, that's done a lot in first-person shooters. It's pretty much a mainstay. It's also being used in some fighting games now to try to make gameplay smoother in an online environment. Well, why am I mentioning multiplayer in a solo play in, say, a game like Tomb Raider that you're not even going to play multiplayer content on? Well, that's because you're still connecting to a server and you're still sending data back and forth to the server. Not only are they streaming all the images of everything that's going on the server of it to you, they're taking your inputs and then they should be comparing your state as a player to the state that's on the server on it to see whether or not you hit the target that you were shooting at, even in a single player game. So that's another thing that needs to be happened on it. So those are a couple things that I've seen that are kind of a thing. The other thing that strikes me funny is that we're really even having this conversation, because it was not that long ago that people were up in arms about being online always. I mean, Xbox One came out, people lost their mind, and because it was always going to be online. You had to be online to play it. Not everybody has access to the internet. And then you had Diablo 3 that did the same thing. I mean, it had a multitude of other problems that we're not going to go into here, but it always being online and not really having an offline mode drove people crazy. Now they're talking about the same thing with Diablo 4, but that's another topic. And they both got roasted for that suggestion. People were not happy with just gaming that was always online at all. So I'm kind of surprised we've kind of come this full circle in this short a time. So it makes the topic even more interesting just from a psychological standpoint of what people are thinking. The other thing that has me a little worried about the streaming services is the price point and what you're going to pay. Stadia, I don't feel like they've chose the right model for this, because you're paying an extra $10 for like 4K if you want to be able to stream in that, which for me, I've got a 4K monitor, but I don't have a 4K TV, so for me, it wouldn't be as big of a draw, but I could see somebody else with 4K TVs being really into it. So that's an extra $10 a month just for the privilege of doing that. And then on top of that, you have to pay $60 for the game. You're buying the game a la carte. Now, the problem I have with that and the developers need to get their money, but most of these games that they're charging $60 for don't cost $60 anymore. They're much cheaper on other platforms. They run more reliably on other platforms. You don't have the input lag delay on other platforms. They have a more established player base from the multiplayer aspect of it. So you're going to have more people to play with on it. So why would you pay full price for it on this platform when you could pay less for the same thing on another platform and be able to play it more efficiently? And why are you paying full price at all? That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. If Netflix asked me to pay $20 for every freaking show I wanted to stream, I would drop an heartbeat. There's no way I would pay for that. Absolutely no way. Now, if you want to give me a heavy, deep discount as far as the games go, because it's a streaming service and I'm not going to own a physical copy of it, and it removes some of the tedium of me having to update the game and things like that and keep it on my hard drive, that I understand. This should be more of a service base, not retail base. I'm already slightly annoyed that we're in a digital age where pretty much everybody downloads games, and I still pay the same price for something that I never get a physical copy for as I do for something that I get a physical copy for. Now you're going to tell me that I don't even have a digital copy that I can download and I can play offline. I have to always be connected to the internet. I have to always pay you this fee. And then I had to pay you $60 for the privilege of being able to just stream it to my device and not even have and own it in any way. That's a total ripoff in my mind. Stadia needs to totally rethink that. Now, I don't know any specifics on xCloud or how it gets handled. My understanding is it's going to be more of a streaming-based service on it, where you have certain games that you can play, and they're there, and they're available, and you play like a monthly fee, and you're okay. So from that standpoint, I think that's a much better solution. Also, the fact that they seem to have like 50 games versus like 23 games on Stadia, and they haven't even launched yet, makes it much more of an appealing aspect as far as I'm concerned, as far as the actual product goes. Not even counting like all the hidden costs of data caps, being able to meet the speed requirements on it, multiple people utilizing things in your households, kind of bogging down your network and things like that as far as traffic goes. Not even counting the hardware issues that we've talked about or the optimization issues on it. When it runs better too, it's got more games. That's easy enough. And if their price point is better, then Stadia itself is just not even really competition at this point. Basically, what it boils down to is you have to make up your own mind on whether or not you would rather go streaming and not have to have the hardware in your home to be able to play these games, and which streaming service is good for you, or if you want to stay away from a streaming service entirely. I mean, the more I've gotten into gaming and the older I've gotten and the more I've seen, the more I kind of look at it and go, well, is this necessarily the right thing for me? Because I've had my own quandaries with digital downloads, because if they lose licensing and the game gets pulled and you remove it off your hard drive, you can't really download it anymore. So you kind of lost access to that game that you paid money for. Whereas if you had a physical copy of it, you'd still be able to boot it up and play it. You might not have all the features on it. You might have all the latest downloads on it and updates, but you'd still have a copy of it that you could play. With digital media, you don't always have that because it gets removed off the server and you can't reinstall it. But streaming seems even worse to me, because if you have a streaming service and you start to basically play the game and then they remove it one day because they moved from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 6 to Modern Warfare 7, but they're not going to offer 6 anymore. So pay us another $60 because you didn't pay for 7, you paid for 6. Well, I can't play 6 anymore. Well, too bad. We're not offering as a service anymore. Thanks for your money. That's a worry as far as I'm concerned, as far as this media goes, and whether or not they've really thought those things through or how they're going to treat the customer, because there's a lot of unknowns with this. We don't know what they're going to offer at any given point. And particularly if you have to buy individual games, that's a bigger concern for me as a consumer, because I paid my money for it. And I want to be able to play it as much as I want to play it, regardless of who else is playing it. Now, if you're offering it as a service and you offer these at this time and then you pull that one down and you offer something else, that's different. I can adjust to that because I didn't pay you for an individual game. I paid for your service. What you're offering on that service, if it's worth my money, I will continue to pay you for that service. Otherwise, I can discontinue that service and look for someone else that offers more when I think I want. So from a financial standpoint, that makes more sense to me. Now, there are a couple other services that are out there that I haven't really looked at this point. I'm mostly focused on Stadia and xCloud. But there's a few others that are out there. One's PlayStation Now. It actually does streaming fairly well. And I think one of the reasons it hasn't gotten any real mention, I should say, is that it's kind of Game Pass with a twist. You can stream, but you can also download. So a lot of people don't really look at it as a streaming service, but it is. I mean, you can stream games and kind of take them on the go and kind of move them from a couple of different platforms. For a nominal fee, you get access to a couple hundred games, so it's more of a service-based subscription like what I was talking about. So that makes it a much better value for your dollar, I feel like, than something like Stadia, at least at this moment. Now, it also has a minimum bandwidth requirement of 5 megabits a second. That's half of what the lowest speed is for Stadia, and that's going to be like for 720p. You also don't, like I said, you don't have to pay for the games individually either, so that makes it another good alternative. You also have Jump PC, which streams to PC and also handles VR, so that's a good thing. I haven't really looked at much into Jump PC. I don't really know a lot about it. I don't know if it's service-based. I don't know if it's more or less individual game-based or what. Now, Steam itself will also let you stream your games from like one of your main console. Like I have this on my desktop and I want to stream it to a laptop, I can do that. Now, that kind of lets me move devices on it, but I think you have to be on the same network for that, so that's not really cloud, but it is a nicety. Now, these aren't the only competitors. There are a lot of other competitors that are looking to get in the market. I think AT&T and Verizon's looking at one, like I had mentioned very early on in the topic. EA's looking to get in, but they don't want to spend money on hardware, which I think is probably a good thing on their part, because the last time they had their own hardware with like Origin, it was kind of a mess. Nobody wanted it. And I'm just hoping that they don't have like another overlay that you need, kind of like Uplay from Ubisoft. Because I know with Far Cry 5, I had to log into Steam, then I had to boot up the game in Steam, then I had Steam's overlay, and then I had to log into Uplay in order to access anything, because they wanted to sell me stuff on their store, and it became this whole nightmare of like layers upon layers upon layers. And I think especially with the streaming service, if you're just streaming the game to you, that's going to be even worse, because you're going to be logged into multiple things, and all this data is going to be transferred off to multiple different locations, and it's just going to be an awful experience. Now, ultimately, do I think it's ready or not? In my mind, I don't know that it's ready. I'm on the fence. I'd like to see it work. I think it would give people a lot of options. I think it would make it much easier to be able to like take your game. You'd be able to play it on your console if you wanted to take it somewhere else. Maybe you hook it up on your phone and you take it on your phone for a little while. You get somewhere else, and then you connect into your laptop and you can kind of play on your laptop. And you shouldn't really have any performance issues regardless of what hardware you're on. That's what this technology is supposed to do for us, is to allow us to basically take your game, play your game anywhere, anytime, any place, any hardware, anywhere you want, so long as it'll support the application. And I think the idea of it's actually a great idea. It's just how they're implementing it right now that I'm not certain of. But ultimately, it's up to you, whether or not you want to dive into it, whether you're ready for it, whether you think it's ready. There are a lot of little hidden things as far as distance to data center, how much data you have in a given month. It could be a hidden fee. Whether or not that you have the right speeds to even be able to stream. And then there's also the fact that we don't have net neutrality anymore, which means that, while I don't see any reason for the ISPs to start strangling and throttling these things now, there's nothing to stop them from starting to throttle these speeds, particularly if there's a lot of these out there that are starting to choke the bandwidth on their network. They could start cranking down on these, saying, okay, if you want this, you're either going to have to pay us X amount, or we just don't really allow or support these devices on our network on it because they're too hard on the network. And that's up to them to do. You don't have any say in that, whether or not they do that or not. Now, do I think Stadia itself is ready? No. No, I don't. Given the performance issues, and primarily given the pricing model, which I think is an absolute total ripoff to the consumer. You're gouging the consumer every chance you get. You should not be selling games this way at all. You should either be heavily discounting the games, or just offering this as a service and allowing you to stream them from there. Now, whether or not you feel like you can make money and you can maintain your infrastructure up that way, that's up to you. But this is Google. They have the money to be able to do this, and they have the money to be able to do this right. The fact that they've done this shows that I don't really feel like they're taking it as seriously as they should be taking it if they want to be a success in this market. They were too eager to be out the door and out front first, and they weren't really ready to do it outside of their own little bubble ecosystem that they tested it on. They didn't do any real life tests. They didn't do any stress tests. They didn't do anything in a real world network. They basically, it seems like they tested in a lab, went great, this works, fantastic, whatever, okay, print it, ship it, let's go. Let's make some money off of this. And it looks like Microsoft is going to come around and they're going to actually kick their tail, because it looks like they're doing a better real world test by allowing people to sign up for a beta. Yes, that's right. You can play xCloud now for free if you have an Android phone. I think they're going to start working it on iOS and PC and other platforms sometimes next year. But right now it's only available on Android. So you can try that one out yourself for free. Free. You're helping them test their network. They're not going to charge you anything for it. So you can sign up for it and try it out for yourself and see if that's a better alternative. But I think that's enough rambling on my end for now on this. You guys sound off in the comments and you let me know what you think of this as a streaming service, whether or not you think I hit enough of the points, whether or not you think I missed anything, whether or not I'm totally wrong. You could have Stadia in your house and it could work 100% amazing. And I'd love to hear that, actually, because I have not heard those stories. I have not heard anybody saying that they're having a great time with this thing. Everybody said it's just been fraught with problems. So I'd like to see some positive news on it. And I would kind of like to see it work as a service, because more alternatives to gaming are better than no alternatives to gaming on it. It keeps the market fresh, it keeps things competitive, and it makes people have to move the technology forward, and that's better for everybody. So let me know what you think, and thanks for sticking with me and watching this one all the way through to the end. Have a great day.